Hi again then guys, and welcome to the kind of second part, but not really, to today's earlier video in this same series, GT Masters, where we looked back into the world of Gran Turismo 2 to talk about the Audi TT LM race car. One of the most overlooked unicorn cars from back then, with some very interesting specs and pretty good performance, but it's still one which most people don't talk about that much. This, in some ways, is kind of like the modern Gran Turismo equivalent of that TT LM race car, for a couple of reasons, because in some ways it's a completely different car, but in others, you might be surprised just how similar it is. And of course I'm not just talking about the livery, which of course is a direct homage to that vehicle on Gran Turismo 2, but even beyond that, consider some of the similarities between the two cars. The first is that, as I mentioned with the LM race car, Polyphony chose, and Audi in some cases as well chose, to go for a smaller capacity engine for this particular racing version. The 2-litre in this car is very reminiscent of the 1.8 engine, which I believe is used in the TT LM. That seems very likely. Visually, as I said in that video, it's definitely based on it, and the fact that it is turbocharged makes it fairly likely that it is probably the 1.8 turbo that it's using. Also, this is a TT Quattro which is a less obvious choice, and it definitely has that in common with the LM race car, because something like the DTM car, the Red Bull liveried version which we had on GT4, 5 and 6, was a pretty obvious one to go for. If you're going to have a TT Quattro based race car, well of course you'd go for the DTM car, it's a great car. But these ones are not the obvious choice. A TT Cup or a TT LM, they're very oddball choices, especially when you learn, as I did, and I didn't even notice this until I'd purchased the car, that this is not a TT Quattro, because of course Quattro signifies all-wheel drive. This is not an all-wheel drive car anymore, it's front-wheel drive, and that is a very interesting, you could say predicament, but I wouldn't go that far. It's an interesting quandary, because when you take a car that is optimized, I mean, even to the point of having it in its name to be all-wheel drive, and then make it front-wheel drive, that is a drastic difference to make. And it's not that the difference can't work, it's that you could be giving yourself more trouble than it's worth. Why not just make it, for instance, rear-wheel drive instead? Or why change it from being all-wheel drive at all? For instance, Polyphony could have gone full fictional and made it like the Veyron, which still has all-wheel drive, and is in this same class, which is really weird, but that's the way it is on the game. However, they didn't. It's front engine, front wheel drive, it's got a 2-litre motor, similar kind of specs to the TT RS in road form, 335 horsepower, just under 300 pound-feet of torque, and it weighs 1125 kilos, which perhaps isn't quite as light as you might have expected it to be, with front wheel drive especially, but it's not too bad, and of course, just like the Veyron, you can drop the weight significantly. In fact, you can actually make the weight quite similar to the old TT LM race car. Now, the horsepower per tonne without any upgrades is just under 300, and although that doesn't sound remarkable, especially compared to many of the cars that we talk about on the channel, that's not bad. That's not bad at all for the category. It's, again, similar to the Veyron, for instance. And the question arises then, as I mentioned just now, when you take a car that was not intended to be front-wheel drive and make it front-wheel drive, you could be courting disaster, because you're taking it up against cars which are, from day one, front-wheel drive. And not just front-wheel drive, they're really good at it, like the Megane and the Scirocco. They were day one intended and developed and designed and optimized by the manufacturers to be just that, really good front-wheel drive performance cars. This wasn't. This was designed to be a really good, optimized, all-wheel drive coupe. So how does it fare? Well, I don't talk trash on cars that often, and I'm not going to here, but it does need to be said that you can tell, even if you didn't know anything about the Audi TT Quattro line, I believe you could tell that this car wasn't intended to be front-wheel drive, because it looks the part, it sounds the part, and in a straight line the performance is very good, but as soon as you try to take a corner in it, you can immediately tell this car does not like being front-wheel drive. Some cars relish being front-wheel drive. It's superb for them. Hondas, for instance, the Type R models, you can immediately tell this car was intended for that. You could change it if you want to, but at least you know that if you keep front-wheel drive, it will use it well. This car doesn't. This car is heavy. It's much, much heavier and much more on that end of the front-wheel drive spectrum, because some front-wheel drive cars have amazing turn-in, superb handling, and others are not necessarily bad, because front-wheel drive will always give you an amount of a safety net, if you want to look at it that way, that I've mentioned a number of times on the channel. It's one of the best things about a front-wheel drive car, but it will naturally give you understeer and torque steer, and you can definitely feel that in this Audi, and unfortunately the more you upgrade it, the stronger that effect is, which isn't too surprising. Now, with that being said, I don't want it to seem like I'm saying that this is a bad car. It's not at all. But if you are a TT fan, or just in a broader sense an Audi fan, or even you just want to try something different in the category, don't expect this TT Quattro to offer you anything like the normal TT Quattro does. It's a totally different machine, and although it has some visual similarities to the DTM car, it really couldn't be more different. It is an entirely different animal. So as long as you recognise that going into buying this car, which is of course 350 grand, just like all of the others in the category, if that is you choose to buy it, or if you win it instead, then just be prepared for it not to necessarily be quite as good as you might be hoping that it is. Because it does look the part. It's an impressive looking racing car, and to be honest, when I first saw the car, although once you think about it it's obvious, I thought that this was a Group 3 car. Now, once you think about it, it's obvious that it's not. Of course it's not, because the R8 is. But to me, this looks like it could be. If you just give it all-wheel drive again and a bit more power, say around 500 or 600, it's a believable Group 3 car. It has a reminiscent look to both the DTM and the LM race car, and beyond just the livery. So this is a car which, if you have measured expectations with, you could be pleasantly surprised. But you definitely need to bear in mind that it's a front-wheel drive car, because it will remind you of that very quickly. And as far as front-wheel drive models go, I would mark this car down in a summed-up sense by saying I'd give it an A for effort, but it's definitely not the best front driver that you can get, even within the Group 4 class. So bear that in mind if you do try to use it or buy it or win it. But overall, that's it for this particular pick, and either way, it's still a great spiritual successor, if you will, within the franchise of that old TT LM race car. But that's it for this pick overall. Of course, I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.